go to personality. I don't know if you can read these goofy things that I put up here. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the 4 basic personality types later, but we're going to go with the book description of personalities first. Now, the longer list of personalities that the book has is basically a diagnostic approach. What bothers me about this section of the book isn't that they address these personality types, and in their video they do a good job of making people understand that these personality types are tendencies that you have, but they're not necessarily mental illnesses. In the book, it almost sounds like they're all mental illnesses, okay? And that's because they're psychiatrists who do diagnosis, and that came through in this particular section of the book. But I'm going to use them anyway, and not going to give you a lot of details on them. The obsessive compulsive, and they do deal with it more from the disorder, okay? But an obsessive compulsive personality is typically the perfectionist, the worrier, the detail-oriented person. They're known as in the disorder. Now, I understand that there's personalities and there's the disorder, okay? And there's personality disorders, which are pretty serious. That I don't know why we call it that, but a personality disorder is the most serious form of diagnosis to treat. Okay, and again, if you watch the video that they have on this, they'll talk about one of them is obsessive compulsive. And it's not, because you have obsessive compulsive tendencies doesn't mean you have an obsessive compulsive disorder. But there are people with obsessive compulsive disorders. They're the ones that are characterized by things like washing their hands over and over and over again until they bleed. It's an obsessive compulsive disorder. And checking you can't go to bed at night until they check all the windows and doors about a dozen times, and then they still go to bed with a lot of stress. Okay. I knew a guy that, and he was very functional, but because I didn't even know he was this way. I worked with him for years, and I never knew, and actually pastored him for a while. And when I went into his home, and I walked in, and this was after his wife died, and that's probably why it became more noticeable. He would have his, the trash that he was throwing out, like if he had milk jugs or bottles or something, he'd have them all lined up on his counter, in perfect order and size. And if they ever got out of order, it would just mess with him. Now, some of you, no doubt, in a class of this size, you have some obsessive compulsive tendencies and things getting out of order. When my wife and daughter must have some of this in them, because I can drive them crazy. And I can't even load the dishwasher without my daughter getting anguish, It's like, I don't care if all the glasses of the same size are at the same side of the who cares? They're going to get washed anyway. And I'll load it, and sometimes I do it just to be mean. But anyway, and if Amy's there, she'll start changing it, and it just humors me. Because it just bothers her because things are out of order. And my son said that we think that my oldest granddaughter has some obsessive compulsive tendencies, and my son said, I'm going to test those severely because he doesn't have any, trust me. Yes.
Is that the same or different, than a pet peeve?
I think it'd be different, although pet peeves could come from, maybe people with obsessive compulsive tendencies or personality do tend to have a lot of pet peeves. They could. And I have a few. It's so funny because, I don't know, there's some things that bother me that don't seem to bother others. Like a little thing, if the blinds are crooked, if you raise them and they're crooked, I don't know why that, I don't care how the dishwasher's loaded, but don't raise the blinds and have it crooked. And if there's, if there's the ledge for the window, the frame for the window, line that up. So I must have a little bit of this. I don't know. And I go through the house, and my obsessive compulsive wife, it doesn't bother her. I don't know, but that bothers me. Maybe she does that just to get even with me. I don't know. And I go through and I adjust them, you know. So I guess we all have, maybe that's a pet peeve, I don't know. But then there's the histrionic personality or the hysterical personality. One of the guys, I always forget which one is Minirth and Meyer. Minirth, I think, is the hysterical personality, and I think Meyer is the obsessive compulsive. So they are so different. And they actually quit working together, by the way. They worked together for years, ran these psychiatric clinics, wrote books, did films, and now they can't work together anymore. So I guess these personalities finally came through and they couldn't stand it anymore. And but they cry to be the center of attention. And it's interesting to listen to him talk on the video because he just says, I love to be in the, I love people to notice me. I love their honesty. That's one thing I like about hanging out with some of these counselors. There's just this brutal honesty. Yeah, I'm histrionic. Yeah, notice me. Here I am. Let me see if I can make you laugh. I feel really good about myself. And he was talking about watching a football game and on television. He said, I'm the hysterical person. I'm jumping up and down, screaming, telling him to go, run, run, run. He said, like, how's that going to help? I'm hollering at a television. And it doesn't seem to help. So hysterical personalities, very like to be the center of attention, like to be noticed. Often they'll do extreme behavior or dress extreme. Not always, but sometimes. Then there's a paranoid. They tend to be jealous and suspicious. And I think it's in Intro to Counseling, I have a slide that it says, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean everybody's not out to get me. And but they tend to just think people are out to get them. And this is a personality that, it's just as real as any others. And people have this, and I tend to want to react against this for some reason. I don't know why. It's like, oh, come on, quit it. But they can't help it any more than the obsessive compulsive does. Yeah, you can work on this, okay. But it's just kind of a natural bent to be jealous and suspicious. Then the cyclothymic is very hyper. They tend to think this is inherited, okay, as opposed to being learned. So I don't know. I wish I had a little more cyclothymic in me. I need to be more hyper. Yes?
My mom, in our Sunday school many years ago, we had a boy who could not sit still ever. He was just constantly in motion. And through the years, she would, whenever he'd really start getting hyper, she would just kind of take him, when he was really small, she'd take him on her lap and she'd be playing the piano and she'd just hold him really close and she wouldn't let him move at all. And eventually, he learned that he could control it, and now he's like the quietest, most gentleman-like, he's a young man now, that he could possibly be. So I think that, just from my observation, that if it's, even if it's inherited or if it's learned, it can be unlearned at some point, if you just keep working.
Yeah, and with children, pretty much all children tend to be a little hyper. And that's part of the physical development, in the brain. So sometimes it does correct itself. Two of the most hyper kids I've ever known today are two of the most calm adults. Sometimes you want to just kick them, get with it, So it is kind of strange. But typically if a person has a cyclothymic personality, it'll typically go with them into adulthood. They're just high energy people, just always into something, always busy. And find it hard to just sit down and relax.